Bergara is a Spanish gun maker. Now, anybody on the bench rest scene or has had their sporting rifle rebarreled recently has probably come across Bergara when they've been trying to decide exactly what barrel they're going to put on their rifle. They make some very fine rifle barrels, and there's a good reason for that. What is quite interesting to note before we get into this rifle itself is that Ed Schillen of Schillen Barrels in America actually consults to Bergara. Now, as a lot of people will be aware, Schillen makes some of the best barrels in the world, and there's a lot of world records that have been broken over the years with rifles fitted with Schillen barrels. So as you would expect, any company that Ed Schillen is going to put his name to as a consultant is going to produce some very fine barrels as well. But the whole point behind Bergara was to produce fine barrels, but at production costs. I've already shot this rifle quite extensively over the last month. I've had it at the range a lot, I've done some stalking with it. Nick Latest from Sporting Rifle was up with me, and he shot a couple of row with this exact rifle here. And what I can tell you right now, before we get into the rifle, is that it really can shoot. I was quite honestly surprised by how well. I mean, this was a brand new rifle. This was one of the first ones given to a UK journalist. So it had no barrel breaking whatsoever. In fact, I've got my first target here. After bore sighting it, I got the first shot on paper, and then this was my next 3 shots here. Now that group is under 3/4 of an inch, and if every rifle did that, you would certainly be very happy. Now that was with 105 grain geckos. I ran a variety of ammunition through this 243, and it really wasn't fussy at all. The first interesting aspect of this rifle is that it's actually a switch barrel. So we'll go through the switching process of barrels and bolt heads before we look into the rest of the rifle. Now, Bergara have made life quite easy for you. Much the same way as a shotgun, there's a little lever underneath the forestock here. If you depress that, it allows you just to pop it off. So you'll be able to see how the receiver attaches to the barrel. Now, it's basically a split collar which is compressed via 2 Allen screws, and the Allen screws also act as locators with locating grooves in the bottom of the barrel. Now, this method is almost identical to a Sauer 202, but a Sauer 202 has 3 fixing points, the Bergara just has 2, but it certainly doesn't seem to make any difference, and it's a method that certainly works. So if I just find my Allen key and take these out, I can show you how the fixing works. So with these undone, and assuming that the bolt is removed, it is as simple as sliding the barrel from the receiver. If I put this down, you will notice that at the end of the chamber there's a locating lug. Now this fits inside the receiver to make sure the barrel is the correct way up when you refit it. And you will also see that because it's a switch barrel, to ensure that the head spacing is exactly the same every time you replace the barrel, which is very, very important for accurate shooting, the lugs of the bolt fit inside the barrel itself. It's a comfortable rifle to use both on the range and in the field. It comes to the shoulder very nicely, and your eye is nicely aligned along the rifle. It has a checkering alternative on it which feels nice in the hand. It's grippable, but it probably is a lot cheaper to manufacture, and it's certainly not as nice aesthetically to look at, but it's certainly functional. The wood lacks the really nice dark grains of high quality walnut, and it does have a little bit of a light feel about it, but it is functional, it works, it looks nice enough, and there are some nice finishing touches on the caps that Bergara have added. If we take a look at the forestock, I do have one small criticism of it, and that is that the mechanism that attaches the forestock to the receiver in order to allow you to get in to replace the barrel has just a little bit too much play in it. You can see that the forestock has a little bit of wiggle left and right. Now, obviously it would be desirable if this was tightened up so that there was no movement at all in it, but despite that, it still is free floating, and I've shot it off bags and I've shot it off bipods. Certainly doesn't seem to make any difference to how it shoots. The trigger blade itself is a little bit thin for my liking, but that's a personal preference. I prefer a nice fat trigger blade to rest my finger on. The brake, when I got the rifle, wasn't particularly good, I have to say. However, the trigger is adjustable, and with a little bit of tinkering, I did manage to get it down to a break that was more than satisfactory. It may be a little bit on the heavy side, but it is a stalking rifle, it's not a varmint rifle, and so you can get away with that. If we move up to the safety catch, there's nothing particularly fancy about it. It's a 2-position and in the same place as a Seiko or a Remington. It's a little bit noisy if you just switch it back and forward. However, a lot of safety catches are like that, and if you just apply a bit of pressure with your thumb as you're squeezing it forward, you can make the rifle ready for fire almost silently. You've probably already noticed that the bolt is a lot longer and more substantial than you really need for a 243 like the rifle that we're testing. However, we've seen this before with multi-barrel rifles, and the reason for this is that this bolt has to cater for everything from your treble 2s and your 223s right up to your 375s and your 9.3s, and for that you need a substantial bolt. Now, of course, if you're shooting one of the smaller calibers, you're going to have to put up with a lot more bolt throw than you would do for a dedicated rifle, but that's just one of the things that you have to compromise on if you want a rifle that can shoot multiple calibers. Operation of the bolt is nice and smooth, and it locks down firmly into 6 locking lugs. Before we get to the point of removing the woodwork from the receiver, we finally get to the magazine. Now, Bergara have done something a little unusual here, in that unlike most manufacturers which sleeve the magazine well to aid in the insertion and extraction of the magazine, Bergara have fitted it straight into the woodwork. Now, what this does mean is that it's a little bit sticky and sometimes a bit tricky just to get it to click in, but as long as you push it in firmly and you hear that click, it fits nice and securely. So now we get to the point where we're going to have a look underneath the woodwork, and I think there will be one final surprise here for you to look at. With the woodwork out the way, we can see exactly how Bergara go about forming their receiver. All the other rifles that we've had for review on the shooting show have had machined steel receivers, but the Bergara is a little bit different. It has a cast receiver, and you can see where it's come out of the mold here. There are some other American manufacturers that use an investment casting process to form their receivers, and I'm sure that this is probably quite similar to that. So that pretty much covers all the different aspects of this rifle. It is really a great shooter, and you would expect that given the pedigree of the barrels. It comes in around the £1,500 mark for the synthetic version, which is sort of middle ground, but it's very good value for money when it comes to a switch barrel. You can spend a lot more money if you want a switch barrel, and the Bergara competes very competitively there. I think what you need to do, given that Bergara is a new name in the UK, is go to your local gun shop and pick one off the shelf and see what you think for yourself. And I'm sure that as time goes by and Bergara bring out some new models, they will begin to gain traction in the UK, and I'll be interested to see where they go in the future.